Solid Edge contains a process-specific environment dedicated to creating wires, paths, cables, bundles, and a wire harness. So let's take a look at this particular environment. Under the configurations, we're going to take and go to the 07 wiring configuration, which allows us to turn off information we don't need to view while looking at the wire harness. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the Tools and select the Harness Design command. You'll notice it takes us into the harness environment where we do have the harness wizard. And then, of course, if you want to manually create wires, cables, and bundles, you can do so. And we're going to take a look at all of this information. Now, what we have here is the Iron Eagle and some wires that go from the control box to some specific components in the Iron Eagle. And I've already started creating some wires and a cable, but what I want to do is go ahead and continue on with that. So I'm going to show you how we can create a wire very easily. And of course, we're just going to create a wire path first and then apply specific properties to the path. So just by simply selecting the cylinder, it automatically will give us a kind of a from-to point-to-point type path. And then we'll go into the controller. And then with a simple right mouse button click, it will actually specify and bring up the properties. Now these properties are stored in a text file, so a user could actually fill in the information with the gauge and wire types that they particularly use. Now for this, I think we're just going to use the 20 gauge solid copper. In this case, I'll just select blue for the color. And then we can continue on. And what I want to do is I want to create these 3 wires, and we're just going to go back again to the controller. We're just going to work back and forth. This time we'll go into this lower control box. Again, it's going to bring up, well, what type of wire do you want to create? And I'll just create maybe magenta. You'll notice it does turn the wire that color, so you kind of get an idea of what particular wire that you've created. And again, this is 20 gauge. And then once that's created, the last wire that we will create, we'll just come back over and roll it up and go right in, and you can see how easy it is to specifically tell where you want to create this particular wire, and then of course pick the color and then preview. At any time you want to look at any of the properties for that particular wire, you can come over and specify properties for this particular wire. It shows you description, the diameter, the gauge, all of the pertinent information that you would expect to see within the properties for that particular wire. Now, once we're done with that, you'll notice that those 3 wires run from the switch over to these control boxes. And you'll notice on the other wire that we created, they kind of go into a cable, and that's kind of what we want to do now. We've already created the 3 wires, but I'd like to actually develop the cable that goes in to those wires. So let's go ahead and do that. You notice we'll just come up and identify the cable command. And the one requirement for a cable is that you want to select the wires that will make up that cable. So I'm simply going to pick those 3 wires that we just created, and just with the right mouse button click, we can accept them. And then at that point we can start creating the cable path itself. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply select this circle that I have created here, and then I'm going to go back to the circular cutout, so it'll allow me to identify circular cutouts. And what we want to do is kind of run through this grommet, and then we want to run through the cylinder in this hold down clamp, and then right mouse button click, and you'll notice it creates the path for the actual cable itself. At that point, we're going to come up and we can select whatever gauge that we want to select here. So maybe we do, say, something like 14.3. And we'll go ahead and preview that. And you'll notice that it will take those wires and it will reroute them through the cable path. And then when the cable finishes, it'll go back to the 3 wires. So again, very easy to manipulate and change and create the cable that you're looking for. Now another thing that I'd like to do is you'll notice that the endpoints are controlled with what we refer to as blue dots. So if I, for example, pick that blue dot and then I click on the edit button, it's going to allow me to grab that blue dot and adjust it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock in. You'll notice it gives us this triad, and I can lock into a plane or an axis. In this case, I'm going to pick the y-axis and just simply pull this cable out, and you'll notice how the wires will automatically adjust to that. Now once we're done, one of the things that I think is kind of neat is I like to come down to the harness itself, and I like to use the option to create the physical conductors. And what that does is that actually creates the physical conductors to show you what those wires actually look like. And in fact, what we also can do is we can hide the wires, and you notice it turns off the actual sketches or the paths for those wires. Another kind of neat thing that we can do is if I want to, for example, we'll go to face select mode, and if I come in here and grab, for example, the cylinder for that sheet metal cylinder, I can grab the plane, and notice I can move the location if I want to adjust the location, and watch how the wires will, once I click to place it, notice how the wires automatically update to the change. So again, everything's associative. You can change the properties, and you can easily go in and change the wire paths, and just by simply creating wires, cables, or bundles that will bundle cables and wires together, again, it's a very simple process. Another area that I think is unique to Solid Edge is the ability to read in from an ECAD system. Now again, this is a process-specific environment for a wire harness, and one of the things about reading something in from an ECAD system is it's looking for component names and terminal names. That way it knows what part to go to, or what component to go to, and what component to go from, as well as the terminals. And in order to set that up, I'm going to go back to part select mode, and I'm going to select this particular component because I wanted to show you when you go into a component in Solid Edge, you also can create set up a component name for the wire harness. Under the tools, you notice we have assign terminals, and when I click on that, you'll notice that it brings up an assign terminals dialog box. This allows me to assign this a component name that an ECAD system would understand, and also the terminal names. In this case, I just numbered the terminals 1 through 8. So if I want a wire to come from the relay component, maybe from terminal 3, this is how we actually assign those names to this particular part. So what I'm going to do is close and return back to the assembly, and then we can go back into the harness design and take a look at this wire harness wizard. So what we'll do is just kick off the wizard, and here you can see the different ECAD systems that we read information in. I'm going to use a Solid Edge sample for this sample that I've created, and we'll use the engine component for our components file, and we'll also use the engine connection for our connection file. It's a 3-step process wizard. That's step 1, just to point to the component and connection file. The next step is actually it calls out the component names that it's looking for in the file. Now you'll notice that the components have already been named, and when I read in this information, it was looking for specific component names. It found those names, and so it tells you it's populated. The neat thing about this wizard is you can also assign components and occurrences on the fly. Right while you're in this wizard, I could come out to Solid Edge and pick a component and give it a name, and that way we could populate it on the fly if we wanted to. There's the relay that we opened up and we looked at, and it found it automatically. Then we can go to the final step, which is basically the wire step. You know, what are you going to call the wire? It's going to go from what component to which component, and then of course the terminals. And then of course you want to pick what type of wire that you're actually creating. So in this case, you know, you just pick a particular wire or a cable attribute, and then you go with it. If you want to preview any of these, you can do so. And also we have some different properties that you can set, like how many number of points do you want to put on a wire. And those are the blue dots where you can adjust the wire. Maybe you want to increase the sheathing strip back length. We'll change this to maybe 15%. And then when we're done with that, we can simply click on the Finish button, and it automatically creates the wires from all of those different components. And those are, I believe there's 6 different components that it goes to. Now you'll notice that when it creates this particular cable from the harness wizard, it also gave us the blue dots. And if I open up these wires, you'll notice that it shows us which wires go where, and it highlights them as I go across those wires. And if I want to make any changes to this, how do we do it? Well, there's the blue dot. So if I right mouse button click and go to that blue dot and simply edit it, you'll notice I can grab it and maybe I want to adjust it down. And notice how the wires will automatically adjust as I select them. And if we zoom up a little bit on this area, you'll notice also that I can also select the wires themselves. So if I come down and pick the wire path and then click on the edit button, you'll notice it shows the one. We only use 1 point per path, so there's the point, and I can simply grab it, and then I can just come up while I'm in the edit mode. You can grab the wires one after the other, and if you want to adjust just the way they look, maybe you don't like the way they, the way they come out of the terminal, you can adjust them. And so that's what I'm doing here, and I'm just making a slight adjustment so they look a little bit better. Now you can do that on both ends very easily. After we're done with that, again, I always like to come back to the harness to create the physical conductors to actually see what these cables and wires look like. Again, I'm going to right mouse button click, and I'm going to hide all wires, which is the actual path itself. Kind of gives us a better depiction of what those wires actually look like. So once the paths are created, easy to inspect them, again easy to edit their information, easy to change the properties that make up. Maybe you want to change the gauge length or something of that nature. I think another thing that's key to a harness environment or a wiring environment is the ability to create reports. And we have what we call harness report. And you can report on the components. And so if I open up those components, it shows us the component names, and we can actually create a report on this type of information. Also, if you want to create a report on the connections, and you can come in here and you can see how each wire is created, the connections, and you can actually get the cut length for the wires, which is important information that you might want to pass to the drafting environment. So with all of these tools that are available, we think that Solid Edge ST4 offers a very unique and powerful package for or environment for creating your wiring needs, whether it's through the harness wizard, reading in from an ECAD system, or just manually creating the wires. Once we're done, we can close the harness environment and go back out to the top level, and we thank you for your time.